Welcome everybody to another episode of Vinyl Saints. I'm JC3. I am your host, and that is Big Joe. Big Joe, say hello.
Hello.
On today's episode of Vinyl Saints, we're going to be talking about whether bands who have members leave, like original members, when they leave, should those bands or those members die, should those bands continue touring and being the band?
Okay, so let's set a parameter here. Are you talking about when they leave or when they die? Because
Both.
Okay.
We can talk about both. I know it's two separate scenarios.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I get that. But we could definitely talk about both, and we can have that debate whether or not you believe, because there's many examples from new bands to past bands. You know, obviously all you have, these 60s, 70s bands members are dying off now, unfortunately, because they're at that age, and we're getting to the point where now it's just like a cover band. It's not really like...
Yeah, it's pretty much. That's exactly what like. I'll give you one example right off the bat. Foreigner, cover band. You can tell all the Kelly Hansen you want. Doesn't matter. He's not an original. None of the guys in the band right now, even Mick Jones, are not there anymore. It is not Foreigner. I know for money's sake, they want to go out and pretend it's Foreigner, but it's not Foreigner.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
I know, I could see you. I know you have a strong feeling about this type of...
Oh, I can't stand it. It's not a strong feeling. It's a fucking livid hate.
He has a livid hate. Okay, so from AC/DC to Van Halen, Journey to Kiss, this is a debate older than most of your favorite tour shirts. So let's get into it, okay? You already, so I'm guessing, I know your answer. You just go straight off, you believe that these bands should just stop.
It's a matter of, yes, stop touring as that band. That band no longer exists. It's not a case of you're replacing the keyboard player. When you're replacing the whole band, it's not the band.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
AC/DC, when Bon Scott passed away.
Didn't replace the whole band. You replaced the singer.
But they could have called it quits.
They could have.
Well, let's just put it like this. I believe if you really want to put dollars to donuts, AC/DC is probably more successful now than they were with Bon Scott.
More successful, more commercially successful, yeah. I'll give you that much. But as far as hardcore fans, you're going to be long pressed to find a hardcore AC/DC fan that's going to sit there and go, this version of AC/DC is better than the version with Bon Scott. Personal opinion.
Okay, I mean, I'm not a big AC/DC fan. I like some of their songs, but Back in Black is one of the best albums of all time.
It's a great album. It's a great comeback album. Yeah, no doubt about it. They actually started anew with a different singer. And they moved on and they did what they had to do, but it was the core band. You still had, the brothers were still there. This was a band that was still together, and they just replaced the singer. Now it's up to the fans to decide, do I want to go out and I want to hear this new singer do the old stuff? And I'll give you an example. When Deep Purple came, when Ian Gillan left, or I'll give you, it's a perfect example, because when the first singer left,
Deep Purple, yes.
Right. Ian Gillan didn't cover his stuff. A few things he did. Hush, he did. Obviously.
Well, Hush is one of their biggest songs of all time.
Well, it wasn't an Ian Gillan track, but he covered it and he ran with it and he did a good job. And he did a couple of other ones here and there. When Ian Gillan left, David Coverdale came in. He did a couple of songs, but he really didn't. They didn't go out and tell you we're Mark II. We're the Ian Gillan version of Deep Purple, because they weren't. They went on and they did, all the other stuff that they did. Burn, Stormbringer, Come Taste the Band. That's the stuff that they did after, and they made a mark on themselves. That band was a mark unto itself. Was the core band was still there. Richie and, Glover was gone at that point too, but, Richie, John Lord, and Ian Pace were still there. So you had 3/5 of the original band, which they were actually the original band right through. But it's up to the fan now to accept it. And if you still wanted to hear what they brought to the table, you're going to listen to it. As far as calling it Deep Purple, they do it for a commercial. You know who really did it bad?
Oh.
Bad Company. Bad Company did it horrible. They had a lead singer that nobody wanted to hear. And they went out and they toured as Bad Company. And the funny thing is, the members of Bad Company, and I'm trying to remember the lead singer's name, they didn't want to call it Bad Company. But the record company and the powers that be said, no, you have to call it Bad Company because there's money in it. But it was not even close to being Bad Company. So it's a matter of what's going to sell at what given time. And we got a few bands that I really are going to raise my blood pressure. But
well, no, I know, and we're gonna get to those bands right now. I want to get to one which, again, you could sit here and say both singers, it was a singer replace, both singers probably as successful as each other because one album. And I don't know if I'm going to describe this band, but only the singer was replaced.
Did he leave on his own accord, or did he?
He left on his own accord.
Do I know this band?
Oh yeah, you're a big fan of. I believe you're a bigger fan of the second singer than you are of the first singer.
Okay.
The album that the second singer dropped was probably a bigger album than anything the first singer dropped.
Oh, we're going to talk about Black Sabbath here.
No, we're not talking about Black
no?
Sabbath. This is, well, no, first of all, we'll talk about Black Sabbath later on because
Gonna have to. It's in this genre.
I don't agree with you on that point, but this is Van Halen. I believe 5150 is probably bigger than anything Van Halen dropped with David Lee Roth.
It's arguable. It's arguable. I don't know what the sales were on each one of them, but okay. Van Halen with David Lee Roth laid the groundwork. Now, no matter what you think of David Lee Roth, and I personally think the guy's just way out there.
He's an asshole.
Okay, well, I wasn't going to say that, but he's way out there. Okay, asshole works. All right. No matter what you think of him, he lit the fuse along with Eddie's playing. Now, let's put it this way. If Eddie Van Halen wasn't in that band, they'd have been parking cars after the first album.
Well, Eddie did the writing too, right? He wrote or did Alex do the writing?
No, I think it was a group effort on their part. But again, see, this band is an anomaly because you have an otherworldly guitar player that actually put his stamp on all that early stuff. When they got to be Van Halen, or I'm going to call it Van Hager for the sake of arguing, they became more melodic. They still rocked. They didn't rock in the same vein as Van Halen did. Van Halen was actually, you could say, basically they were a borderline biker gang bar, or whatever, gang. I can't talk. So
biker band,
right now again, it's up to the people like AC/DC. Are you going to buy into this? Is still Van Halen? They did with AC/DC because of Back in Black was such a great album, and people bought into that. They wanted to hear more. And it just evolved from there. But if that sucked, if that was bad, people would say, get this guy out of here. He's horrible. But the music was good.
You're always taking a chance when you're replacing an original.
Right.
So you're always taking that chance.
And it's easier, I'll be honest with you, it's easier after the original singer passes away because now you have to accept this. So you can't go back. Okay? It's like with Van Halen, took a while because people were like, where's David Lee Roth? No Dave, no Van Halen. Dave's alive. He could always come back to the band, and eventually he did. That's one of the parameters you got to watch here, because if the guy's still alive, people are going to be pining for him. It's like the Jets, it's like the New York Jets.
Why do you have to bring the Jets in there?
We're pining for Rex Ryan, and we got this guy. So anyway,
I mean, but if you take it to the extent of what didn't work, as far as another band, like around the same time they replaced the singer, Motley Crue and Vince Neil, did not work.
It didn't work because first off, Motley, it depends on who you talk to. If you talk to Vince Neil, he was fired. If you talk to the rest of the band, he quit. Okay? People weren't ready for a new singer in Van Halen. I mean, and what band are we talking about?
Wow, Motley Crue.
Motley Crue. They weren't ready for it. All right? And it just happened like overnight. It lasted one album. It was John Corabi we're talking about.
Yeah,
who later went on. I mean, his stuff now is amazing when he's not parading around thinking he's Steven Tyler. But he's got a whole genre unto himself. The Dead Daisies, had them, left them, came back. But yeah, John Corabi never, and I believe John Corabi actually pulled him aside and said, look, you need to get Vince Neil back in this band. It ain't working. So that's pretty.
Do you see my point though? Because like you have these bands like Van Halen and AC/DC who replaced lead singers, beloved lead singers. Now again, Bon Scott died. There's nothing you can really do about that. Yeah, you can bury him, and yet they had a choice: either we stop or we continue.
Correct.
And they continued, and they probably did more commercial success than anything than what they did with Bon Scott.
The music from that first album was so good. People were always like, I got to hear this again. I got to get more. And that's basically what it is.
Yeah. Then you have Van Halen, who David Lee Roth did not die. He went on to have a solo career. Whether you say it's a successful solo career, that's up for opinion.
I don't mind the two albums that he put out at that time. Skyscraper was my favorite, but, I don't mind it. I really don't. But
Yeah,
then again,
so
the band that he had there was amazing. Steve Vai, I mean,
yeah, but then you have two examples of successfully replacing the lead singer, and now we're just we're talking about lead singers right now, and we'll talk about other parts of the band later on.
right.
But replacing the lead singers and it working. Then you have Motley Crue, it didn't work. I would say another band that probably didn't work was Guns N' Roses,
Yeah,
and
not at all.
replacing I believe that was Miles Kennedy that replaced.
No. Miles
Oh.
Kennedy actually was with Slash. I'm trying to remember the name of the band. It was Slash and Miles Kennedy and something.
Yeah, but didn't he tour as the Guns N' Roses frontman for like a hot minute?
No, because when everybody left, what's his name acquired the name. They all left. They gave up the rights to the name, and Axl owns the rights to the band now. I mean, if I'm wrong, correct me, but I believe that's the way it went because he actually toured with Axl Rose and 5 other musicians called it Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
And it never panned out. And again, look, I'm not a big Guns N' Roses fan. I love
neither
it.
am I.
Appetite is a great album.
They had one successful album.
Okay, and then the double album, the twin album that they put out, they were okay. But at that point, Steven Adler's already out of the band, and the band was going in different directions. It's the old adage, when you're doing if you're doing your heroin, your albums are going to be great. You stop doing heroin and try to get clean, your albums suck.
But yeah, so you have Deep Purple. They replaced their singer twice, and
Wait a
each
minute. Once, twice, 3.
well, I'm talking about
4,
up until
and then 5 with the same guy.
Yeah, I'm talking about up to the point in which you're talking about with Byrne and David Coverdale. That's
Right.
only 3 times at that point.
But it's David Coverdale. You bring in David Coverdale, the music's going to be great.
Yeah, but at that time they brought in David Coverdale. They didn't know who David Coverdale was.
Oh, David Coverdale didn't know it. Actually, you know how David Coverdale got that gig? He was a singer. I think the name of the band he was with was called The Government. And he was just, a little bar band. David Coverdale's mom saw the ad for a singer. So they sent the tape of David Coverdale. She sent the tape of David Coverdale in. And that's how they recruited him. So his mom actually got him the gig.
Well, there you go.
With Purple.
Thank you, Mama Coverdale. And fortunately, the band was so good for Deep Purple, and the writing was so good, and each mock made its mark as its own. This is our music, where they have enough stuff that they don't have to play each other's songs.
And don't forget, in Deep Purple, it's completely different. Mark 1 they played a lot of covers. The Hush is actually a Joe South song. I mean, they played some Motown on the 3 albums on Tetragrammaton. And then from that point on, Richie wanted to do heavier stuff, so he got rid of the lead singer and the bass player, Nicky Simper and Rod Evans. They're gone. And he brings in Screamer Ian, and that's not a slight. That's Ian. Ian's a great singer.
Is this after or before Jesus Christ Superstar?
Oh, it was after.
It was after.
It was after. And at that point, when they released In Rock, everybody's like, wait a minute, this is Deep Purple we know. And then they went on and they launched a phenomenal career up to 73. You had In Rock, then you had, trying to think of the other ones, Machine Head. God, my mind's anyway, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Up to the 4th album of Mark II, and then
so
they were fired.
I want to talk about a band who's replaced the lead singer since creation, from the 60s all the way to now. Their second lead singer, probably the biggest one. They've been trying to replicate that since he left. And that band is Journey. Journey, if people will disagree with what I say, but I think Steve Perry is Journey's lead singer. Do I think Arnel Pineda is a good lead singer? I think he's a good singer. I don't think he's a good frontman. And I think after Steve Augeri left, the band should have packed it in. Because that 2008 Revelation album was a good album. I'm not saying it's not. It was a really good album.
Had its moments.
Had a couple great songs.
None of them were Journey moments, but okay.
But if you listen to some of that album, even in the 2001 Augeri album, and a lot of bands do this, but it just pisses me off when it happens, they're recycling songs.
Okay.
And that pisses me off when you start recycling songs. That means you can't write anything new. And you're recycling, especially your own songs. Like if you're going to but if you're going to sample other people's songs and do something new with it, I'm okay with that. It's a sample. I'm fine with that. But if you're going to start recycling your own stuff and putting out as new songs, that's what pisses me off. So when it comes to Journey, I don't think, because they tried, they saw Arnel Pineda on YouTube, that sounds like Perry. Same thing with Augeri. Augeri at his times does sound like Steve Perry, but I think Augeri is a really good singer. I don't know what your opinion is on Steve Augeri. If you want to elaborate on your opinion of Steve Augeri.
I thought you were going to do your thing and I was going to do mine.
What?
Oh, so you want me to go now?
I mean, if you want to talk about Steve Augeri real quick.
Okay. Steve Algieri, just Steve Algieri. And actually, I actually had a conversation with Steve Algieri one time on the internet about this. And at one point he was saying something to the effect of, and I said to him, how hard is it to do what you're doing? You know, do you find it difficult out there? He goes, it's difficult for the fans to let go of Steve Perry. And I'm trying to live up to being, the legacy of Steve Perry. And I said, the last time, it was a short conversation, 3 lines each way. And I said, well, one thing you got to understand is you don't have to be Steve Perry. You're Steve Algieri. You have your own little niche. Tall Stories, the first 2 albums the first album was great. The second album I think was wonderful, brilliant. And I said to him, you're Steve Algieri, and that's enough. Steve Algieri's great in his own right. And he never really went on to do something majorly after that. I mean, he had the throat problem, so they canned him. But Steve Algieri, in my opinion, sounded somewhat like Steve Perry, but not enough to say, this is Steve Perry. The problem I got with bands that replace the lead singer with a clone, that's a problem, because then you're admitting that lead singer is the lead singer. If Arnel Pineda doesn't come out as the thing and start and singing somewhat like Steve Perry, he's not getting the job, okay? They never really went from the Steve Perry-esque sound, and they try to keep that going. So my point is, if Steve Perry's out there, mend your wounds, go out there. Now, if he doesn't want to do it, that's fine. But then bring in somebody else and do something different.
Well, you know what I think is the problem is that Jonathan Cain writes so much to fit Steve Perry's voice that he can't write for anything else.
Okay, I'm going to correct you on that. I think Jonathan Cain writes that Perry fits in. It's not that he writes to Perry. Perry just fit into that. And I'll give you an example. When he wrote Open Arms, he gave it to John Wade. He was in the Babies at the time. Yeah, he was in the Babies at the time. And John Wade goes, nah, it's just not for me. It's too sappy. And when Steve Perry heard it, Steve Perry took over, added some stuff of his own. And he's like, no, I think his exact quote was, too bad for John, but great for us. Because Steve Perry fit that song. It wasn't written for Steve Perry. And I think that's the beauty of Journey between Jonathan Cain and Steve Perry. I think that was wonderful. John would write the music. Steve would come in. I'm sure there's music out there that he wrote that Steve Perry wanted nothing of. I mean, I'm sure it's out there somewhere. We're never going to see it because they don't release it. But I do believe that is good. But that's the case with that. But my issue with the whole Journey situation is everybody in Journey thinks they're bigger than the band.
Journey has been a disaster over the last 10 years.
Yeah, simply because, and I'm not going to go in here and badmouth anybody. However, yes, I am. Okay. I don't like the fact that, and I know he's the original guitar player, and I know Neil Sean's a brilliant guitar player.
Oh yeah.
But Neil Sean sometimes gets too wrapped up in Neil Sean.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And it's a shame because, no, you got to know your role here. I know you started the band. I know you're on stage at 15 in Woodstock with Santana. All fantastic items, great things I've never accomplished. So I can't criticize that. However, when you have a band, biggest Journey was, and I'm going to say was because they're nowhere near where they were.
Oh, God, no. I agree with you.
You have to take into account it's not all you. And it isn't. It was never all Neil Sean.
Well, I mean, if you look at Journey's first album,
which one? You talking about the first one, or are you talking about the first with Steve Perry?
No, before Steve Perry.
Okay.
Now I'm not gonna badmouth the first couple albums because I think there's some great tracks on there.
It's a jam band.
You had
That's just my
the pianist that played in Santa. What's his name?
Greg Rowley.
Greg Rowley, who I think is a brilliant singer. I think is a brilliant writer.
What did for Santana alone?
No, I like I said, I agree with you. But you're talking about two different styles when it comes to Journey with Perry and Journey without Perry, as far as at that time. Journey without Perry is more of a, I don't want to say prog band, but they're more like a jam out, like a Santana-esque light band.
I totally disagree with that. I don't believe that at all. I think what they tried to do is they tried to capture the Steve Perry sound.
I'm talking before Steve Perry.
Oh, before Steve Perry.
Before Steve Perry.
Well, don't forget that's that was his gig then. You're coming out of Santana, the two of them. Greg Rowley and Neil Sean came out of Santana. Yeah, that's what they try to emulate at that point, which is pretty good. And their first 3 albums are really, really good albums. But again, they're not for Journey fans. Unless you're a hardcore Journey fan. Most hardcore Journey fans started in 78 with Steve Perry.
All right, so I do want to talk about a couple more. We talked about Van Halen, but we never talked about Van Halen 3 with Gary Cherone and how that was a disaster. Complete disaster. That's a disaster in excess when obviously the lead singer passed away, but they had a whole fucking TV show trying to get their new lead singer.
Is he still there?
I forgot the guy's name.
JD something.
I don't know.
Oh.
That was 25 years ago, 20 years ago, something like that.
I don't know.
Completely, that's a disaster in excess. I don't even think they put an album with the guy. I'll be honest with you. I don't even know.
I don't know. I really never a big NXS fan.
Another band that I'm not a big fan of, but obviously I've heard about them. I know the leads. I know the person who's in it is Smashing Pumpkins with Billy Corgan. So they're saying, again, I don't know Smashing Pumpkins this way, but Billy Corgan is the band at this point, and everyone else is just like a guest musician.
That's the way it was
with the Smashing Pumpkins.
Wasn't the keyboard player in there the brother of Wendy from the Revolution? I believe it was, and he passed away.
But here's the thing. Do you think that these are great examples of saying maybe you should stop?
Why should he stop?
No, I'm saying just these bands. Like if your lead singer either passes away and and nothing goes well after trying to replace him or whichever, do you think that should be a sign for these bands to be like, okay, let's put this down now? Okay. Like, do you go the Led Zeppelin route?
It's really not for me to say. However, I can't put my opinion in Jimmy Page's head. When John Bonham died, you just don't go out and get another drummer. Neil Peart, you don't just go out and get another drummer, although they found somebody and they're touring this year, which is, I think it's cool. I mean, you got 2/5 of the original, 2/3 of the original, I think that's pretty cool. That when Bonham died, when Keith Moon died, these bands had to make a decision. At that point, and with The Who, you had 3/4 of the original. Keith Moon was irreplaceable, but you could get somebody in there. They brought in Kenny Jones from the Faces. I thought he did an adequate job, and he was British. And somehow the British always are going to meld with the British better. It's not for me to put in their heart what they should do. If you're asking me if I would do it, I would say, like with Led Zeppelin, gee, that's hard for me to say because I'm not them. It's really tough because you want to stop at that point. You want to honor the band's legacy. Say these 4 guys were, but then it goes back to, well, he passed away. So now, because of his death, should you stop the band?
Well, I mean,
did the fans lose out now?
I mean, it goes into the same thing with Stone Temple Pilots when Scott Weiland passed away.
Yeah. Well, he was a lead singer. You got to go a little differently when it's a lead singer. And if you're going to go that route, like AC/DC, they went that route after Scott died. But then what they did was they took Bon Scott sounds nothing like Brian Johnson. Nothing. So you're not getting the two mixed up. When Brian Johnson is singing Highway to Hell, it's Brian Johnson. He's not trying to emulate
Bon Scott.
So that you got to take into consideration that as well.
No, I get that. Here's an ethical question for you.
Go ahead.
Are bands doing any of this by replacing beloved people in their bands? Are they doing it for fans or are they doing it for a payday?
I think they're doing it because, first of all, they're doing it for the first reason they got involved in rock and roll and music. They love music and they want to continue. They love the spotlight. They love the cash. They love everything that goes with that lifestyle.
Well,
and there's a way to keep going.
Here is a band, which we've talked about before, and this is going to be the ethical dilemma for you because this band has a tour planned with no original members.
And they should sit down. If there's no original members, you're not the band. That's my rule.
Kiss is planning a tour with their AI.
I have no time. Look, first of all, I don't want to talk about Kiss. I don't, because Kiss is so off the fucking charts, ridiculous. It's not funny. Okay, it's all, back in the day, I remember Paul Stanley saying, you know what? We're now becoming a mockery. The band is becoming a mockery, and it's more of a cartoon now. And he says, exact words were, this is a problem. Well, you're bringing your AI characters out. You're going on. You're doing this. You're doing that. It's a mockery. It's a mockery of what was. Okay? In fact, quite frankly, I'm going to say it was a mockery the last, 10 years of what was. You put 2 other people in costumes of the original, which weren't them. That's not it. That's not what fans wanted.
I'm going to give a little push.
True fans.
I'm going to give a little pushback here. You're right. They did. Would you have not had a problem with it if they came up with their own persona, like what's his face did the other drummer?
Yeah, I would have had. But what I would have had a better thing with. I know they did it because You know, there's a whole generation that went by and didn't see the original Kiss show, and they wanted to do that for the original,
Yes.
and it was something they had, and they wanted to get this yada, 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 all this bullshit while the dollar signs are dancing around Gene's head. I get it. I get it. But what I don't get is imitation. And just like going back to Arnold Pineda, you're imitating Steve Perry. David Coverdale's not imitating Glenn Hughes. They went in their different direction. Now, I would have liked it if they didn't come up with any persona. At that point, just go out and say, you know what? We're Eric Singer and whoever the other guy was. Tommy Thayer. And saying, this is it. We're going out. We're taking our makeup off and we're going to rock.
But you can't, oh, sorry about that. You can't do that and call it a Kiss show then.
Why not? You can put him in makeup and call it a Kiss show.
Because the makeup is the show. That's the thing with Kiss.
Well, then it's no longer a rock show. Then it's theatrics.
That's what Kiss is.
So, you know, hold on. When this is where I separate music from what most people do. When I'm in front of my stereo and I'm sitting there with my headphones on and my eyes are closed, I'm listening to Kiss. I'm not watching the explosions. I'm not watching all that stuff. Mind you, yeah, I mean, it's great for all that stuff where they want to do that, but that's not what rock and roll is to me. I may be in a minority, and that's perfectly fine. I don't care.
I agree with you, but if you're talking about Kiss then versus Kiss now, there's a difference.
Why is there a difference? They're doing exactly what they did then. They're not playing any Kiss Unmasked stuff.
No, you're right. But what I'm saying is there's a difference because Kiss put out 3 albums when they put the makeup back on. And that was Psycho Circus, Monster, and I forgot the name of the last one.
And that was the original Kiss.
Well, no. Psycho Circus was the original Kiss. Right. Psycho Circus was Gene, Paul, Ace, and Peter. The Monster and the last one they did, again, I don't remember the name of the last one. Mm-hmm. Monster, I think, is the one with Modern Day Delilah, or it might be Modern Day Delilah that has those are done with Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer.
Dressed in Kiss regalia.
Just dressed as Ace and Peter.
Right. Well, they're not Ace and Peter.
You're right.
And they shouldn't have gone out as Ace and Peter. It was
my thing when you're talking about that is we all know the last 2 albums are not really good Kiss albums.
Yeah, I'll take your word for it. I haven't listened to Kiss since Psycho Circus.
Yeah, so they're not really good Kiss albums. My whole thing is when you're listening to Kiss back then, it was about the music. It was about the music. It was about playing the music. Yes, they wanted to make money. Yes, they wanted to have sex.
Back then, as far as where?
The 70s, leading up to Kiss without makeup.
All right, now you again, I lived through it, so I'm going to explain it to you. When you say it's about the music, 7 out of 10 people that said, oh, I'm a Kiss fan, they like the pageantry. They like the show. They like all that. Yeah, the music became secondary at that point.
That's what happens now, too.
Okay, and that's a shame because you are a rock, and here's the key word here, a rock band. You're not a theatrical group. You're a rock band. Now, I'm not taking anything away from the theatrics. You know, it's part of the show. That's it. But see, I'm like that with, like when you watch these pop singers come out and they have the entire stage with dancers. Okay. I don't want to watch that. I want to hear.
Look, I agree with you, and I think this goes into a different type of show regardless, but I will push back again on that point because we talked about the comparisons with them. Alice Cooper is as much of a theatrical show than he is music. And are you going to sit there and say, are you going to tell me that Alice Cooper would have been as successful if he just came out on the same thing with Kiss, if they just came out with jeans and a t-shirt and played music?
No, not at all. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that if you're going to base it on that, if you're going to base it on the show, then do the correct show. Don't come out and say, these are going tonight the spot of Ace Frehley is played by Tommy Thayer. You're dressing them up like
it is a persona. It is not the person themselves.
Oh, now it's a persona. Back in the day, it wasn't a persona.
It's always been well, yes, it was.
No, back in the day these are our 4 superheroes.
No, yeah, they're characters.
No, I never looked at. No,
the reason I say I'm not wrong. The reason I say they're characters is because if they were the people and you cared about the people, did you care about Ace Frehley or Peter Criss before you knew that they were like the person themselves? Before Kiss turned around and took off the makeup, you knew who was under that makeup. If Kiss would have went up there and played every stadium, every tour, or every show with a different person in that makeup, and they played exactly the same way, you wouldn't know who those people were. Am I right?
You would if you're a fan, you know.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, you would.
No, you wouldn't.
You're going to tell me that you line up the 4 members, you have 4 original members of Kiss, and then you line up 4 imposters in the same makeup, you can tell they're different people.
Are you talking about now, or are you talking about then?
Anytime.
If the music is the same, it doesn't matter who's behind the makeup.
All right, so okay, if you're going to see the show, are you going to see the bombastics of the show, or are you just closing everything off, walling off everything, and listening to the music? Because I can get any imposter to do the music, okay?
So my
point is they pushed a product I didn't think they should have pushed. That's all. That's just all I'm saying. You can look at. I mean, your opinion is your opinion.
No,
my opinion is I don't like fakeness. I don't.
So basically, I mean, the question I have here: would you rather see a legacy band limp along with no real pieces, or call it quits with dignity?
A legacy. All right. So define that. When you're talking about if
like Kiss.
Right.
Kiss is technically a legacy band at this point. You know, they have their legacy over 60 years of music, over 60 years of touring.
See, Joe, again, you want to talk about the theatrics. When Peter Criss left, all right, what the hell's his name he came in? Eric Carr came in.
Eric Carr, rest in peace.
He didn't dress as
You're right. He
didn't. And the show went on.
They added his own persona, still with the makeup.
Listen,
Vinnie Vincent again had his own persona.
Right. So they still went on with the show.
You're right, but it was
done that now.
It was a different show.
Shit.
It was a different show.
Bullshit. The only thing different about it was Vinnie Vincent didn't fucking have his guitar and shoot fireworks out of it.
That's exactly it.
Did Gene Simmons breathe fire and life?
No. I'm fine. I'm fine with Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley doing their shtick. It's their shtick. What I'm saying is, if you sat there and they gave these characters or personas to Eric Singer and Tommy Thayer, who could sit there and replicate the same shit that Ace Frehley and Peter Criss did, what does it matter? If you're a real fan, not a real fan, but if you're a fan and you want to see Peter Criss and Ace Frehley because it is the original band and you grew up watching the original band, I understand that. But for the people who there are and they've seen you said it now. For the people who they are pandering their product to today, well, not today, they're retired at this point, but for the people who are pandering their product when they were touring over the last 25 years, it is for the new generation who did not get to see a Kiss concert the way it was back in the 70s and 80s. And that's what this was. That's why they put Kiss, Tommy Thayer, and Peter Criss into Peter and Ace's makeup.
Again, Joe, it's a matter of opinion. I find it ridiculous to go out there and put the same show on without the original people that are still available. And you could have done it. You could have put the band back together. It could have been, you're actually giving the people Peter Criss and you're giving the people Ace Frehley. You're not giving them. Now, I got nothing against Tommy Thayer except that he's a wannabe. Eric Singer has a laundry list of plays. He was in Black Sabbath. He was in Badlands. I love Eric Singer as a drummer. What I don't love is the fact that you're not the Catman. You're not. And that's my only problem with Ace and Paul, Gene and Paul, it just seems to me that they rolled on with the money and did whatever they had to do. Now, you may look at it differently, and I guess that's fine as well. But that's just my opinion.
All right. So let's move on to bands like Black Sabbath. So you have Black Sabbath, who made their mark with Ozzy Osbourne. Rest in peace, Ozzy. Made their mark with Ozzy Osbourne and then moved on from Ozzy. Ozzy goes on and has his solo career.
Yes.
And they replace him with Ronnie James Dio, who came from the band Elf.
And then Ian Gillan, and then Glenn Hughes, and then Eric Martin. It's a laundry list.
You have these British bands, especially in that type of era, or that type of genre. British bands who not sound exactly like, I'm not going to say it that way, but you have these British bands who have interchangeable parts. Same thing goes with Whitesnake and Deep Purple, or Rainbow and Deep Purple. What do you?
No. If you want to talk about Rainbow, Deep Purple, and Whitesnake, you come to the right source. Okay. With Rainbow or Blackmore's Rainbow, it was Ritchie Blackmore and everybody else. To this moment, it was Ritchie Blackmore and everybody else, because Ritchie Blackmore never kept the same lineup more than once.
What I'm saying, their interchangeable parts are with those other bands.
There's people that played in Dio. There's people that played in, let's see, they played in Whitesnake.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, they're interchangeable. Bob Daisley's another one. But what I'm saying is the Deep Purple never had interchangeable parts. They didn't bring people in on a whim. This band would stay together for 4 or 5 albums. Rainbow, you're not going to get that. Whitesnake is David Coverdale. Period. End of story. You can put any other musician around them. It's David Coverdale. Now, if you want to go to the original Whitesnake, which is completely different than what David Coverdale is doing now.
Yeah, it was just Deep Purple.
That was a band. That wasn't just David Coverdale. You had a band around him. However, the first band, Duck Dowell, the drummer, gone. Okay, he was replaced. Next thing you know, the second guy was replaced with Ian Pace. All right, keyboard player, gone. Bring in John Lord. And then it was on from there. It was always like, there was never the same setup more than, you had your core. You had, Bernie Marsden, Mickey Moody, try to remember the bass player's name. That was the core of Whitesnake. When they left, then Whitesnake became interchangeable with every other band. But the constant was David Coverdale.
So it goes into, so if you're fine with Whitesnake having many different band members as long as David Coverdale is a singer, because that's what it
For the reason I just told you. Anybody that followed David Coverdale and Richie Blackmore knows that this is the way they operate. It's not like, these are the five guys in Rainbow.
Okay.
Because Rainbow wasn't Rainbow. Rainbow was literally Elf with Richie Blackmore.
Okay. I just don't like how it can be different for different bands. Like, if you were to take,
what's different?
Well, look, my point exactly. Like, if you were to take what's his face out of the Rolling Stones,
who?
Mick Jagger.
There's no Rolling Stones.
You have Keith Richards. You have the rest of the band.
There's no Rolling Stones without either of them. Without either of them, that's an anomaly. You're not going to replace somebody who's 82 years old and have been together since 1959. It's not going to happen. There's a mark. It's an indelible mark on those two. Okay. Charlie Watts died. They replaced the drummer. Okay. Billy Wyman, the bass player, he left. They moved on. You're not going to go out touring as the Rolling Stones without Keith Richards, and you're sure shit ain't going out there without what's his name? Mick Jagger. It's not going to happen.
Well,
and that's probably the only case I can think of.
Well, people thought the same thing of Black Sabbath when they got rid of Sabbath when Ozzy went on his own.
Look, Black Sabbath, yeah, and he did. And there was a lot of detractors for that. They were like, how could you do it? Until Ronnie proved himself on Heaven and Hell. But again, the band didn't come out there and get an Ozzy clone. They went out and they got somebody else that took them in a completely different direction. The albums between Ozzy and the albums between Ronnie are not even, it's night and day.
See, like, I understand that, but I think I just have a problem with it being so different for, like I said, with different bands. Another example right now, granted, they're touring, they're having good album sales, stuff like that, but it just doesn't feel the same because you look at this band as the band and not just one person, and that would be Bon Jovi. Without
core is still there.
I understand that, but Richie Sambora is not.
Richie Sambora is not, and it took a hit for a while. Okay, but again, Richie Sambora was never the main draw of that band. It was always John and Richie. Richie decided he didn't want to do it anymore, so he moved on for his own reasons, personal or whatever, not for me to say yes or no. Are you replacing the band Bon Jovi if John retires and brings in a John Bon Jovi? Is this still Bon Jovi?
Well, no,
okay.
It's not.
That's my point. All right, that's my point. You can't. There's some indelible marks you can't go. You can replace Richie, and they did. Took them 2 guitar players to do it. And I'm not saying anything about the 2 guitar. I love John Shanks. I think he's in his. I don't think he's in the right element. John Shanks is more of a country guy. I think he writes better for country stuff. However, he's got a gig with John. John loves him. Phil X. Phil X had his own gig, but Phil X to me has always been somebody who comes in after the original guy leaves. He did that. He did that in Triumph. All right. And I'm not saying anything about Phil X. He's a great guitar player. He's carried on Bon Jovi for the last 15 years. And you know what? It's working. As much as I hate to say it. My problem with Bon Jovi was the writing. I think Bon Jovi more or less start writing differently. And I get it. His voice ain't the same. I understand that. But I also believe that Bon Jovi's writing now is what his writing would have been back in the day if he didn't get lumped in with the metal stuff. That's just my opinion. But again, You're not taking Bon Jovi out of Bon Jovi, all right? They already toured a couple of dates without Tico, okay? The only constants in that band that have been the only constants are John and
David Bryan.
David Bryan, that's it.
It's just completely fucked up for me because you definitely, like I said, it's standards for different bands because of certain situations.
Right. But that's got to be the way it's got to be. You're not going to change that. Rolling Stones cannot be replaced. Cannot be replaced. They're doing it for 70 years, 65 years. You're not replacing them. Jovi, almost 40 years now, 40 some years. You're not taking John Bon Jovi out of Bon Jovi and calling it Bon Jovi. I'll give you some examples that piss me off. You want some examples? I already mentioned Foreigner, which I think is a disgrace. And I'm going to go back a ways here. Okay. I know this is off the beaten track. There's a band out there called the Classics 4. Stormy, Spooky, all those late 60s stuff. Not original member in the band. Dennis Yost passes away. They get on with somebody else, and now they're leasing the name from whoever owns it. And they're touring as the Classics 4. It's not like they're going out or doing the music of the Classics 4. They're Dupree's, same thing. There's not an original member in the Dupree's. There's no Joey Van. These are bands that should not go on as the original band. And here's one that really gets me, all right? A little old band out of Jacksonville, Jacksonville, Florida. Molly Hatchet. Please, hang it up. Don't go out on tour as Molly Hatchet. There's nobody in Molly Hatchet anymore that was in Molly Hatchet. There's no original members. There's no nothing. Just because you were lucky enough to secure the name from the original from the original guitar player at the time doesn't mean that you now can go out there and tour. You're ripping the people off. It's a disgrace, and it needs to stop. And as I'm talking to you, we're going to go to Jacksonville, Florida again. A band that I absolutely adore. I loved them my entire life. Leonard Skinner, it's over. You're not Leonard Skinner. You're not. Stop it. As much as I like Johnny, you're not Leonard Skinner. There's no Billy Powell in the band, okay? There's no Gary Rossington in the band. These are the guys, these are the legacy characters that made this band go on.
Leonard Skinner for me is a different situation, only because I believe the people that have been in the band right now have been in longer than the original members.
No, that's not true. Every band now has been in the band a slight amount of time. The only guy that might have been in there now, been there real long, is Ricky Medlock. But then again, if you really want to get down to brass tacks, Ricky Medlock was their original drummer before he went on, and they never toured, never recorded with him.
How long has Johnny been the lead singer?
Oh, 21, no more than that. It's 91. So what, it's almost 40 years now.
34.
34 years. Okay, that's fine. And I just said that before. I love Johnny, but he can go on and sing Leonard Skinner tunes on his own right now. Because he does not have the backing of Leonard Skinner. And what bothers me is Leonard, when Ronnie died, they actually had an agreement. It was called the three original members agreement. When the band comes down to under 3 original members, it had to stop. It didn't. Kept going. When Billy Powell died, the last 3 original members that were in the band was Billy Powell, the Mad Hatter, the bass player, Leon Wilkinson, and Guy Rossington. Leon Wilkinson dies. Now you're down to 2. Just shut it down. Oh, no, we can keep going on. We'll keep going on. Money's coming in, all right? Billy Powell dies. Now you're down to 1. Guy Rossington took the band for almost 35 years on his own. Guy Rossington dies. Now you have no original members left. So what are we touring as?
Do you think there has to be a lead-in for people who have been in the band long enough, and even longer than original members? I do think, like fucking, we'll go back to Kiss. Tommy Thayer and Eric Singer were in the band longer than the original members were in the band.
Then why aren't they in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
That is a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame issue, not a band issue.
Again,
we're gonna have an episode on the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and
let's do that.
The bad things that happen with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. No, I mean, I don't give a fuck about curse words,
obviously,
but I think there has to be something said for people who have been in the band 20 plus years, even longer than original members. Now, I think there's also a difference between what we're talking about with these rock bands, ones from 60s, 70s, and then you have bands prior to that, like, the Dupree's, and like where all these original members are mostly all dead or all dead. Any of these like Motown bands, them who have all their original members are dead. And at this point, they're not going out touring, but, they're having these little get-togethers with people in the band as like a tribute to. I'm fine with that. Obviously, they're not the band. They're not saying, well, we are this, like the Temptations right now, or the Four Tops. They have, the Temptations have one original left.
Yeah.
The Four Tops, I don't think, have any.
No, the Four Tops they have the son of one.
Yeah.
And they have none. But what they do have is they have Theo Peoples, the lead singer, who actually was in the Four Tops and the Temptations both. That's probably the only people who's ever done that.
But like I said, I do think there is something to be said for people who have been in the bands long enough to be considered a part of that band.
Okay. So let me ask you this, using your logic, what you just said. So now, at what point do they become the original band? Well, at what point do they become the band?
If you have somebody who is synonymous with, like, let's take a Deep Purple. Deep Purple has so many band members. Yeah, the original band, but when people think of Deep Purple, they think of who?
To be honest with you, when you talk about, when you ask somebody of Deep Purple and they don't know about Deep Purple and they hear them, or they're a light fan, they're going to always come Mark II, the Ian Gill and Roger Glover version. People like me, I embrace all the versions of them because I had the core members there, and they never went on to sound like the previous Mark. Mark II sounds nothing like Mark I. Mark III sounds nothing like Mark II. And when they brought in Joel and Turner, they sound like Rainbow.
Yeah, okay, I get that. But the guitarist, that's not there anymore. Steve
Morse?
Yeah, Steve Morse.
Right.
He was there probably longer than any of the guitarists they had, right?
The longest tenured Deep Purple guitar player, yeah.
So would you sit there and say Steve Morse is considered part of Deep Purple?
Part of? Yes. But again, Steve Morse came in and from the door released albums with Steve Morse on it. They could not go, Steve Morse, that version of Deep Purple sounds nothing like any other version of Purple. They don't. And that's the difference between Deep Purple and these other bands.
Were they still playing the popular songs that were on the album?
Of course, but even those versions sounded nothing like the original. When he did like Pictures of Home, or he did Smoke. Smoke is totally different with Steve Morse playing it. Totally, he plays it different than Richie. His lead is different, but he's a different guitar player than Richie. He's a jam band guitarist. Don't forget, he came out of the Dixie Dregs. The Dixie Dregs were a jam band, our jam band. I don't even know what they're doing these days. Okay. He sounded nothing like that. The current Deep Purple guitar player, Simon McBride, sounds more like Richie than, and it shows because those albums, I think on one album with Simon, I think it's a great album. He hints back to the original or the Richie Blackmore version. He's more true to the original sound of Purple than Steve Morse. But Steve Morse's version kept him going. The songs they played with Steve Morse and Ted the Mechanic, all the stuff that he did were so off the charts, not Deep Purple, that you accepted it as Deep Purple, but you knew it's not that Deep Purple. So you're either going to like it or you're not. But you're not going to say, oh, they're trying to imitate the original. It's just not. It's just not. But Simon McBride sounds more towards the original, but he's got his own niche.
All right. I see your point, but like I said, I do think there has to be something said for people who are in bands long enough to be considered.
I'll give you a band that totally blows your mind with everything else and has nothing to do with anything that they're talking about. The Grassroots. The original Grassroots were 3 songwriters from LA that were put together just to make some music. They were never a band. But they released the first album as the Grassroots. Steve Berry was one of the, he's a writer. Mm-hmm. Okay. He was on that album. They brought in the bass player, Rob Grill. Rob Grill surrounded himself with other people because he was brought in under the moniker of the Grassroots. There was never a band. He became the leader of that band and took him till his death in like 2002. But in doing so, the band that he put together, he brought in, a guy by the name of Dusty Hanvey. Dusty Hanvey has been with the Grassroots since mid-'80s, I believe. And he was the guitar player, one of the most permanent members of the band after Rob Grill secured the name. Then it became a band. Dusty Hanvey still tours with them now. When Rob Grill died, or before he died, he brought in a guy by the name of Mark Dawson. Mark Dawson is now the current bass player and lead singer. I was pissed for a long time because I didn't know that. I know, how can they go out as the Grassroots? Simply because this was hand chosen by the original. This guy said, I want you to go out as the Grassroots. They're honoring his wishes. Are they are they the original Grassroots? No. And when they're on stage, do they say, when we were doing the first album, the second album? No, they don't, because they weren't there. They do go back to the past. They do say, well, when the Grassroots, Grassroots were touring, this is what they were touring with, but they never try to say, we are the Grassroots. And Mark Dawson does a phenomenal job. That's probably the only little exception that I'll allow, because to me, you're not the Grassroots, but you go out and you.
There is one more band I want to talk about, and then we're going to end this episode very shortly, because I think they were more successful without this, and the drummer came in and replaced, and that is a little band known as Genesis,
Okay.
with Peter Gabriel left and Phil Collins came in, and Phil Collins took that band to a higher place than what Peter Gabriel did or could, in my opinion. So I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I do think with replacing band members, I don't think that shutting it down and being like, well, we're not going to be as good or anything like that. I don't think that is never the answer. I don't think you have to go full Led Zeppelin route. A band member dies or they decide to leave. I do think, and it's been many times proven, there's also cases where it doesn't work, but many times proven that you can take in a different direction and you can be very successful, even to points where you don't think you were going to get to that point. Because I don't think people in Genesis thought Phil Collins would take them to where Phil Collins did.
No, they didn't. Again, it's a crapshoot bringing somebody in. But here's the difference with Genesis. Peter Gabriel left. They didn't go out and replace him with somebody from outside till much, much later. They took the drummer and made him the singer. Steve Hackett left, and they never replaced Steve Hackett. Okay, it became a band of three. Hence the name. Then we were three. The album they put out. The music there was sort of like the original, but it wasn't as quirky. Peter Gabriel was a different egg. He was a strange egg. Came out in makeup, did weird shit. Phil Collins wasn't going to do that. And I'm not saying it's bad or it's not. That's a personal preference. But what I'm saying is Phil Collins went a different direction. His music, they wrote more music without Gabriel than they ever did with him. And those songs became bigger and more popular than what they ever did with Gabriel. So you didn't really take the band and revamp it. You just didn't add to it. And you switched it around a little bit. So, but you kept on going. And you went on in a slightly different direction than Peter Gabriel's version. Now, you can argue, I got friends that love the original Genesis. I like the original Genesis. I do. And some of the stuff is really, really good. But then you bring in Phil Collins, who took him to another level, both artistically and commercially. And I believe, in my heart of hearts, it's what they needed to do from that moment on.
All right. Well, that's all we got for today. That's for today's session of Vinyl Saints. If you ever screamed, "This ain't the same band anymore" at a concert, you're not alone. Hit us up in the comments or on TikTok and let us know, should bands replace original members or should they let the name die with the lineup?
We skipped over an entire band that actually lived through that. Judas Priest. Judas Priest was actually the basis for the movie. What was it? Rock band? Or
Rockstar.
Rockstar. That was that story was loosely based upon what happened to Judas Priest. And we didn't touch it. Were they better or were they worse? They replaced them with a guy that sounded just like them. So they really didn't go in a different direction. They stayed the course, but I don't think they were nowhere near as successful as they were at Halford. I'm trying to remember the lead
again,
singer's name before. I can't remember his name right now.
Rob Halford is Judas Priest.
Okay, but he's not an original. So then now what do we do there?
Doesn't matter. Rob Halford is Judas Priest.
Oh, yes. So a non-original guy can then become Judas Priest.
Yes, just like right now, and you're not going to like it, Johnny Van Zant is Lynyrd Skynyrd.
Not even close, but okay. Not even close. See, there's only one original.
Stay on that.
There's only one original. Ian Hill is the only original member of Judas Priest, the bass player. The only one that's been winning from the beginning. But I'm going to agree with you in a way that Rob Halford from 1973, I believe was Rock and Roll, the first album, was the guy that actually toured with him, recorded with him, and went on to do whatever. When they were on Gull Records, I don't know if the first guy ever did an album with him. I don't know.
I did end this episode.
Oh, I'm sorry. But, we'd be remiss not to bring Judas Priest in.
Okay. I agree with you, and you got it in. So I'm JC3. That's Big Joe. This has been Vinyl Saints, where legends never die, but sometimes they suspiciously get better looking. Good night, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Hey, fellow truth seekers. Want to take your love for the Is This Real podcast to the next level? Check out our exclusive merchandise line designed for curious minds like yours in mind. From comfy tees and hoodies to stylish mugs and accessories, our merchandise is the best way for you to show your passion for unraveling the mysteries of the fucking universe. Visit our online store at isthisrealpc.com and gear up to explore the universe in style. Don't just listen, wear your curiosity with pride with Is This Real podcast merchandise.
Hey there, fellow truth seekers. Are you ready to dive deep into the mysteries of the universe? Look no further than IsIsraelPC.com, your one-stop destination for all things mysterious and unexplained. From captivating podcast episodes to thought-provoking articles, our website is packed with fascinating content that will leave you questioning reality. Visit IsIsraelPC.com today and join our community of curious minds as we explore the unknown together. Don't just wonder, discover the truth today at IsIsraelPC.com.